Well, the film is God's Not Dead, In God We Trust. Scott, thanks so much for joining me today. How you doing?
I'm okay, Billy. What are all those things behind you?
Oh, well,
Just
there's all sorts
knickknacks
of
on the
things.
wall?
There's
Okay.
cameras, it's all sorts of little tchotchkes there on the wall.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, it's fun. Well, it's good to connect with you. It's been a while, and you've got this new film, God's Not Dead, In God We Trust. And this film franchise has been really incredible because it's touched on so many different topics. This one coming out in a political year, which is pretty incredible and very interesting. What was it that drew you to this film?
I think what you just said, the timeliness of the story with voting and God being removed from almost everything, or trying to be removed from almost everything in our country. And I think this film, maybe more so than the other ones, in terms of it's the coincidence, and it is a coincidence that this film comes out now, with everything that's going on in the country and the voting, and the fact that 40 million Christians don't vote. And I think so. So I think it's one of the reasons I did it. I did it because I like the movie and the script and the story. But I also, David A.R. White is a friend of mine, and plus I've been wanting to do some of these films.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's what you mentioned there, the fact that there are tens of millions of Christians not voting. When you look at what's happening in the country, what's happening in the world, why do you think it's important for Christians to get out there and make their voices heard at the polls?
Well, I don't think the 40 million Christians realize that they're the 40 million Christians. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that Christians, by and large, I could be wrong, don't want to get involved in politics because they perceive it as ugly and dirty. And I'm sure they complain about the state of the country and which the direction the country is going in, but they need to know that they can fix it. They can affect the change that they want. And whether they're standing on principle, whether they don't like politics, whatever the reason is that they're not getting out there, whether they don't want to go to the polls, you don't have to go to the polls. You can mail in your vote now, which I don't like.
That's a whole other podcast conversation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
At the end of the movie, there's actually a QR code where you can register to vote. So there's really no excuse for these people who can really affect change. Because, Billy, I grew up a certain way, and I'd like my daughter to kind of grow up that way. And I grew up in America, and I don't feel like I live in America right now, and it bothers me because I'm not going to be here that much longer in terms of the grand scheme of things. And my daughter's going to inherit this place, and I want her to inherit a safe country and a God-fearing country.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing. We're at such a weird crossroads in this country. There's such a division in this country, and they're not simple things. They're big things. How the country should run, whether or not God should even be acknowledged, right? So there's so much happening. You have a film like this, God's Not Dead, In God We Trust, that points people back and makes people think about these issues that really do matter. For you as a performer, right? You chose this movie for a reason. What are you hoping the audience walks away with?
I hope they walk away with that it's happening before our eyes. The elimination of God. And Billy, I'm not a holy roller. I'm not, I'm not really, I'm a God fearing Christian, raised Catholic, believe in it. I believe in it. But I want people to know that it's happening, that it's being eliminated from schools, for a time that you couldn't say Merry Christmas. And it's a creep. It creeps. It just keeps creeping and creeping. And until we fight back and knock it down, which we're going to have to keep doing forever, I hope people get that message that we can fix stuff. We can. And there's still elections. There are still elections, and that even might be gone one day. So I would like maybe 10% of those Christians, or all of them, obviously, to vote.
Yeah, one of the things for me that's interesting watching you over the years, obviously you've had this incredible and continue to Hollywood career, and yet you've been open about what you believe about things. And I know that comes with a lot of criticism and a lot of chaos sometimes. Some people are afraid of being canceled, so they don't say anything. Other people are willing to speak up, share their viewpoints, especially when they might run counter to the mainstream of Hollywood. What has that been like for you to be more vocal, be more open? What are some of the things that, maybe you've had to sacrifice to do that? Just talk a little bit about that experience.
Well, for me, in my opinion, it seemed to have it seemed to have started under Obama when Obama got elected. And I didn't know. I don't know him. He seemed like a nice enough guy. I didn't agree with a lot of the things he did, but I didn't hate the guy. I, okay, he won, and I didn't think he should have won, but we had a bad candidate, and that whatever. He won. God bless him. And from there, it kind of started getting a little dicey. And I, for me, I got canceled when I came out for Trump. I spoke at the convention in 2016, and I knew that I would be, and I was fine with it.
You were okay with it. You didn't you kind of knew and you said I'm still going to do this. Was any part of you like maybe I shouldn't?
No, I was in it for what I believed, and you forget who the candidate was. It could have been anybody, but he was saying the things that I agree with. And listen, the only person I agree with 100% of the time is me, right? So, and I agree with a lot of the stuff he was saying. It's a lot of the
Sure.
stuff that
Yeah.
I grew up with. You take away the messenger and you just look at the policy, and everybody knows the policy worked. So and I even said it in an interview. I said, I'm probably going to be canceled, and that's fine. But I do it for my child because I want my child to grow up in a country that I grew up in. I grew up in America. You know what I mean? And I'm not in America right now, and it's bothersome. But I'll give you an example, Billy, how it works. So this was a couple of years after Trump was in office, a couple of years after the conventional, and a friend of mine called up somebody at ABC that hey, we have this idea with Scott Baio, blah 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 blah, and she writes back in an email, I don't want anything to do with Scott Trump Baio. Now she doesn't know me, so that's the effect that it's had. That's what happened, and before all this, and it didn't start with Trump. It was happening, like I said, something with Obama, something, and nothing that I could put my finger on. I think it was policy. I think it was mainly policy driven. He was taking the country. He wanted to fundamentally, his quote was, we live in the greatest nation on earth, and I'm going to fundamentally change it. Well, what the hell does that mean? I live in the greatest nation on earth. Why would you want to change it fundamentally? And I think people went, well, whoa, wait a minute. Whoa, whoa. So I think that was maybe this. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, where you start to realize, and look, it is interesting to me that some of the facets of society that claim to be the most open, right, the most liberal, they sometimes tend to be the most closed when it comes to other ideology. Hollywood, the media, these places where technically on paper you should be able to support whoever you want without anybody saying, "Oh, you're Scott Trump Baio," right, or dismissing you, and yet very often that is not the case. Not that everyone is that way in Hollywood or the media, but a lot of the time, conservatives or people who might vote Republican, they hide out and they don't speak for this very reason. Some might say that was a bold move for you to say, "Hey, I'm going to go with what I believe." Do you view it as a bold move looking back on it now?
No, I'm looking back on it. Was it a bold move to say what I believe? I've always believed this, Billy.
Right,
My
right.
whole life. As far back, and I wasn't politically minded when I was 10, 11, 12 years old, but it was what I saw. It's
Sure.
all I saw. It was, hard people working hard, taking care of themselves, helping out their neighbors, and living a good life. We lived in a
Yeah.
middle class in Brooklyn, New York. I mean, that was it. And I saw my father break his butt going to work, and that's pretty much all I knew. And that's all the dads in my neighborhood, because the dads worked back then 50 years ago, right? I'm not being sexist, ladies, relax. But that's exactly what I grew up with. And so that's the boldness. I'll give you another thing that happened to me. I don't remember when it was. Somebody said to me, we're talking politics in an interview, and somebody said, and it knew as a conservative, they said, "Why do you want to go against the grain?" And I said, "I thought I was the grain. I thought law-abiding, prosperous, God-fearing, helping people, individualism. I thought all that was the grain. Apparently, I'm wrong. The grain is something else." And so I didn't feel. I guess maybe I felt a little bold. Maybe I did.
Well,
But
it shouldn't have to be that way, but like I think like I'm laughing because it shouldn't have to be a question of, oh, I was bold for just speaking what I think. But when you're put in a position where actually saying what you think puts you in a dangerous position, like I mean, there are people who are very fearful that they're going to lose, money and not have food on the table, right? If they say what they think, that's not a healthy place to be as a
right.
culture, regardless of what side that's happening on, right?
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. And that's unfortunate. Uh, and it's talk about fascism. That's fascism. And the definition of fascism, it always says extreme right wing. And I'm like, why would you say extreme right wing? It's not extreme right wing. It's extreme left wing. It's fascism. It's what is happening now. You can't say what and you're mocked if you say anything. You're
Yeah.
you're made fun of. And I find it sad. I find it sad because but the news is constantly dividing us, and it's unfortunate. But Billy, uh, I do it for my child. Like I said, I think I said that. Did I say that to you?
You did. No, I mean, look, I think
Good.
I think that's what I think that's what most I mean, I've talked to people and whether they're on the right or the left, they'll often say, I'm doing this for my kid, or I'm doing this for my grandkids and or I'm voting this way. At the end of the day, though, I think you have people who have different ideas about how the country should run. And we've elevated this to such a place where it's almost unhealthy now, right? Where it's like, oh, if you disagree with me, I have to hate you and we can't be friends and we can't. And it's like, look, you're going to go with what you believe is true. I tend to be a much more conservative person. I live in New York, right? So I'm careful around some people. I share with family. They don't agree with me, right? I'm kind of out on an island by myself, but that's okay. You find a way to love people with whom you disagree and you move on. And I think you have a chance with this film though, just getting back to God's Not Dead and God We Trust, to really impact people and motivate them to get out there and make that voice heard. Because if you're not doing that, you're not going to be able to make any sort of change.
I agree 100%, and I think that's the big story. The big message of the film is the power is right there in front of you, and it doesn't take a lot of effort to use that power. It takes hardly to sign your name and check a box and
That's
send it
it.
in the mail, and you're done. That's it. And
Yep.
at the end of the movie, there's a QR code where you can register to vote, and that's about as simple as it gets. So you got 40 million people out there that don't vote, millions of gun owners that don't vote, and when your guns get taken away, and when your God gets taken away, then what do you do?
Yeah, exactly. Well, listen, Scott, I appreciate your time. The film, God's Not Dead, in God We Trust. Thanks for joining me today.
Billy, a pleasure. Thank you so much.